Hello, everybody, and I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful day. It is another Lunch with Lisa, and I am so happy to be here. All right, today I have the most wonderful topic for all of you, something I know is a huge issue in dating and relationships, probably for the most part. And we are going to talk about boundaries, what they are, how to set them, why they're so important, and all. So, all right. So, what is a boundary? What is a boundary? If anybody knows, you all can put it in the chat. If not, I'm going to tell you right now. So, a boundary is when, excuse me, a boundary is a line, right? Between a distinction between you and another person, like where you stop and that other person begins. So, it's letting somebody know where your limits are, right? What your expectations are, what your limits are around sex, around texting, around having personal space. Anytime you have a limit, a line that you need to draw between you and another person, that's creating a boundary. And what is so important about effectively creating boundaries is that you need to let other people know where your boundaries are. You cannot expect that they are using the same playbook in life as you are. Some people love a lot of texting. Some people like no texting at all. Some people need a guy to confirm a date ahead of time. And other people just know that if a date has been arranged, if that's been set up, then they trust that the person is going to follow through, that they're going to be there, and that it doesn't require any more communication. For example, I didn't grow up in the texting era, so I am not a big fan of text. It's not something I love. I prefer, face-to-face interaction. And to be honest, I actually find it annoying when I'm working, I'm going about my day. And even when friends and other people are texting, it means that I have to shift my focus from whatever I'm doing. And then I'm stuck sometimes in the middle of a texting thread waiting for someone to respond. And, it's disruptive to me. So I am not a huge fan of texting. I also feel or see that many people want a lot of texts and constant communication because it feeds their insecurity and it makes them feel like they are connected when they're maybe not really connected. So we've become so used to having a lot of texting and a lot of communication, and yet then you go on the date and it's not even like there's any real basis for any kind of relationship. And yet, many people going into a first date have had all kinds of texting and messaging and, FaceTiming and all kinds of stuff. My husband and I, just to give you an example, he read my profile, he sent me a message, and I messaged him back. We spoke on the phone for probably 10 minutes tops, and we've now spent 20 years together. So there are no hard and fast rules with any of these things. It's just what works for you. And in order to get your needs met, in order to have somebody, who's going to be able to give you what you need, you have to learn how to ask for that. You have to learn healthy boundary setting. So one of the big mistakes that many of us make is that we operate under the assumption that there are certain rules, that there are certain unwritten rules that other people should know, and that these things in our playbook, they are the correct way to do it. And so somebody else may have a completely different playbook. I was a student of Don Miguel Ruiz. And when I studied with Miguel, he said a lot of great things. But one of the things that really stood out for me that he said to us was that everybody has a different rule book. There's the rule book according to Lisa. There's the rule book according to Rebecca. There's the rule book according to whomever. And you have to communicate your boundaries to someone else, because you cannot expect that they will have the same rule book. So for me, it may say, on page 375, a man should call a woman before a date to confirm or send a text so that she knows that they're on. But in his book, it may be that he made a commitment. He's a man of his word, and it's on his calendar. He's going to show up at the appointed time, and it's not necessary to send a confirmation. So if I were going to have a boundary with that, I might say, hey, Mark, would you be kind enough to confirm our date the day before? I've had some other situations where some men didn't follow through. I showed up for the date and they didn't. And so it would really give me some peace of mind if you could just shoot me a text and let me know that we're on for our date. So I don't have to worry. That is setting a boundary. You're being kind. So how do we set a boundary? How do we do this in a healthy way? You want to not make assumptions. You don't want to shame somebody. You don't want to state something in the negative. You want to ask for what you want to need, and you want to do it in a positive and inviting way. So one thing I know about men is that if a man is really into you, if he really, really likes you, then he wants to get in your good graces. He wants to please you. He wants to make you happy. He wants to do things that will ingratiate you to him, right? By honoring your requests and so forth. So asking for what you want from a man is a very, very important step. It's something I teach all the women in my 12-week emotionally naked dating program that I teach with my husband, Benjamin. And by the way, if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can hop over to my brand spanking new website and you can click on the button. It's all over the website. You can learn more about what we do. There's a page, a work with me page that talks about the programs we offer, including our initial 12-week course. And please, if you want to, you can watch my free presentation. The buttons, like I said, are all over the website for viewing that. And if you want to learn even more about the work we do and you want to see some testimonials, you can go to our praise page, or I think we call it our success stories page. There's some great videos, and there are wonderful testimonials from clients who have done the program. But in that program, one of the things that we teach the women is boundary setting, how to ask for what they want from a man in the right way, and also how to do it in a way that isn't shaming or insulting, but is inviting and playful, and is going to encourage a man to want to get closer to her. One thing I do want to say before I get into how to do that is men have their own list of things that they're looking for in a partner, just like we do. So I decided that everything I was saying and doing as I was getting to know a man was letting that man know who I am, how I approach things, how I ask for things in relationship. And I knew that the right men who were looking for partnership and wanted to get to know me, they were listening carefully to how I was asking or requesting the things that I wanted from that man. And if I did it in the right way, it was really going to pique his interest and make him want to continue seeing me because I was so kind and thoughtful and considerate, loving in the way that I would request things. I was inviting. So when you ask for something, when you put up a boundary, there are a number of things to consider. The first thing I would really encourage all of you to know that is that men don't like being told what to do by women. Men do not like being told what to do, period, but especially by women. And so I would encourage you to think about the way you make requests from a man, the way you set boundaries. So when you do this, you do not want to tell a man what to do. You want to ask him if he is willing to do that. So instead of saying, you need to text me the day before the date, you would be much better to say, I would love it if you would be open to texting me the day before. Is that something you would feel comfortable doing? Could you text me to confirm our date? So you're asking instead of telling him what to do. And what men love is they love having the ability to make a choice, to make it seem like it's their decision. And so what a guy will do is he'll say, oh, of course I can do that. But at least he feels like you're asking him instead of telling him what to do. I find this extremely important when it comes to sex and boundaries around sex. So when you talk to a man about sex and you, I'm going to pause here just for a moment. All right. So when you talk to a man and you're setting boundaries around, Okay, so when you are setting boundaries around sex, you do not want to say, hey, I want to take it slowly. I'm not rushing into anything. I need to know that I'm in a committed relationship before I am going to go down that road with anybody because I'm looking for a partner and not just something casual. If you talk like that to a man, it's really going to shut him down. And if this is a man that you're trying to encourage and that you really like, and you want him to keep wanting to see you and to keep coming back, you've got to be very careful in the way you say this. So the first time you want to say something like, I've rushed into things in the past and it didn't work out well. And so I'm learning the art of taking things slowly, and that includes sex. And so I would really like to get to know someone first and see if we're really compatible before we go down that road. Because, like I said, I've rushed into things before and it just didn't work out well. We became lovers before we became friends. And then it just ended as quickly as it started. So this time I would really love to do this slowly. What do you think about that? And you want to say, what do you think about that, not how do you feel about that. So very important distinction. You don't want to use the word feel, because when you say, how do you feel to a man, in his head, he's like, feel? I don't know how I feel. But if you say, what do you think about that? He can give you an answer. He can say, well, here's what I think about that, and he will give you his opinion. So, but you want to present this in a way that you include him, that it's not a monologue, that you're not dictating how things will be, that you're open to hearing his perspective. And then you're perfectly entitled to sit back and say, yeah, that doesn't work for me, in your own mind or whatever. You can think, wow, he wants to have sex on the third date to see if we're compatible. Yeah, then you can say, this guy is too immature for me and I'm not interested in doing that. But what you're trying to do is show a man that you understand how men think and feel, and that you are open to hearing his perspective, and that you're not just telling him how it's going to be. So we have a couple of comments from listeners. So Amber says, I prefer face-to-face or talking on the phone as well, but my boyfriend, on the other hand, is a huge texter. And Amber, that's very common with men. A lot of times for men, it's easier for them to deal with something. It gives them time to think and formulate their ideas over text, and they don't have to think on the spot. A lot of guys, when you're on the phone and that you're conversing, they feel that it can get into a long conversation. So there are guys who feel so much more comfortable just handling things over the phone and not having to over text, and not having to get into a long phone call. So, there's that. But you can also say to your boyfriend, look, it's okay if you don't want to have a long conversation, but I'd love to hear the sound of your voice. I miss you, and it really makes my day when I hear your voice. So that can be a very inviting way of getting him on the phone. And you said, I've been dating a guy for 9 months. We tend to get into text arguing often when we have a disagreement because he has a temper. And usually when things get heated in a talk, I kind of close up. I usually choose to wait until things have cooled down, but he does do well. But he does do well without that before I get a text from him. So it sounds like you like to just let things cool down a little bit, and he doesn't do well with that. So what you might do is just write to him and say, look, I think we both need a cooling down period. I figured that out, Amber. So you may want to just say to him, look, I would love a little bit. Let's just take a few hours, cool down, give ourselves some time to process this. And let's come back in a little bit when we're both in a better space, we're thinking more clearly, and we can talk about it. So John Gottman from the Gottman Center, he says that it can take, I believe it's 30 minutes all the way up to 2 hours for a person to be able to cool off after there's been an argument. And this is really important for everybody to know. When you are having an argument and two people are in conflict, your stress hormones rise, your cortisol levels go up, all kinds of hormones are flooding your system, and they literally shut down your rational thought. You can't think clearly when your body is flooded with all of these hormones. And it is really best practices to let that cycle through, because all that's going to happen is the conflict will continue to escalate, and you won't be able to reach a consensus or a conclusion. So it is better, Amber, to be able to take a break and then come back after a cooling down period to then sit down and talk about it. And what the Gottmans suggest, and I know this is a very, very hard thing to do because I've coached tons of couples in the past, and it's really, really hard sometimes for them to hear one another's perspective when they're not feeling heard. But what the Gottmans suggest is that one person sits and listens while the other person says, this is, what I was saying. And then you switch places and one person stays quiet while the other person shares. And so that can be ideal and not real because it's very hard to hear somebody. But if you can put yourself in the other person's shoes and you can then come back and quietly, more calmly talk about things, usually you're going to do much better. So you may just send your boyfriend a text or the guy that you're dating and just say, hey, let's take a cooling down period. How about if we come back and talk about this in an hour or after work? And you set an actual time when you'll come back and discuss it. So that's usually the best thing to do. Jennifer says, this is exactly what I say, and it's been perceived okay, but their actions end up telling another story. It's frustrating. Jennifer, I know you may tell men, I want to take things slowly and all, but it is, number one, very important to get their buy-in. So to say, what do you think about that? Is that something you're open to? And then getting him to buy into, look, let's date let's date and get to know each other. And once we've decided that we're in an exclusive relationship, we can look at, having a deeper sexual connection. And then if he continues to push you to cross your boundary, the second time you can say, we talked about this, and I, as far as I understood, we were in agreement that we were going to wait and not jump in. And then the third time, you have your answer. You don't want to keep going back and discussing something over and over and over again with a mature adult. In fact, my husband was the one who said to me, I've rushed into things in the past and it hasn't worked for me. And I'm not rushing into anything, including sex. And he said, I really like you and I really want to get to know you. And I want to take some time to do that. So for me, that was extremely reassuring coming from a man. And that's what we did. We took time. We got to know each other. And the wild thing was, this was a man who took his dating profile down the night we met. He went home and took his dating profile down. I didn't even know until a year later that he had done that. In those days, online dating was so new, we never even talked about whether or not we would take our dating profiles down. We just saw that the relationship was progressing and that we were both getting closer. The trust was building. And we weren't interested in dating other people, but that was a different day and time. And he was the one who said it to me. Amber writes, it's a trauma response for me to shut down because I was raised in a home with yelling parents. And before I sit and argue, I will hang up the phone and that triggers him. So he starts texting. Amber, I just think, the right thing to do is just to say, I feel a trauma response when there's conflict. And so I need a little time to cool off before I can come back and finish this discussion. Can you please give me an hour, or can we please discuss this tonight after work? I would really appreciate it if you could do that for me. And so sometimes that's all you can do is ask for that. If your partner isn't willing to give it to you, and if it's causing stress on the relationship and he's not respecting your boundary or your boundaries, then that's where counseling and coaching and therapy come in to help couples deal with things like this so that they don't keep creating more harm and sabotaging the relationship. So sometimes you need outside help to be able to navigate those things. And it's not uncommon to do that. You also may want to read the book, the Gottman book. It's called The Seven Principles That Make a Marriage Work, I believe. And there's a lot of great exercises. There are some scripts for helping couples be able to navigate these kinds of situations. So check that out. It's a really good book. Okay. If somebody is doing something in a relationship or in a dating, as you're dating and getting to know him, don't make up stories and don't make assumptions. Ask. Just have a conversation. If someone seems to be crossing a boundary with you, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making is that they are so quick to cut someone off when a simple conversation could have done the trick. I have a story from years and years ago with a client who she was really cute. She couldn't get to a second date. And I thought when I first started coaching her that it was the men that weren't asking her out on a second date. And as we started coaching, I found out that she was the one who was finding reasons not to want to go on second dates with all of these guys. So she met a guy, a really cute guy from Great Britain, and she really liked him. And they went on a first date. And then she came in, we were for a coaching session. And I said to her, well, are you going to go on a second date with him? And she said, no, I'm not. And I said, well, why not? It sounds like you really liked him. And she said, yeah, I did. And I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, he corrected my English several times on the date. And first of all, that would feel awkward to anybody, right? If somebody was correcting your English, I don't blame her. That would feel inside kind of rude. But I said, look, you really like him. You told me he's cute. There were so many things, positive things about the date. And I said, look, why don't you, just for the sake of the work that we're doing together, why don't you talk to him about it? And I gave her, there's a process, where I look at a conversation like growing a garden, where you're planting seeds, you're watering the seeds, and then you're sitting back and you're seeing what grows. And so I said, look, let's treat this like you're planting a garden. You're going to create a boundary here with him, and you're going to go to him and have a conversation about this. So I said, this is what you'll do. When he calls or when you talk to him about a second date, you can say, look, there's something I wanted to ask you about that I'm curious about. And I love that line, I'm curious about, because it's extremely open, it's non-judgmental. So when you don't understand someone else's behavior and you need to get clarity, you can say, hey, something happened on our date that I was curious about. And then that opens up, right? Because curiosity is a wonderful way to be curious. And so I said, there's something that happened that I'm curious about. When we were on our date, you corrected my English several times. And I was curious about that. And I wanted to share with you that I felt a little uncomfortable when that happened. So she did this and she sat back and he was mortified. And he said, oh my God, did I do that? He wasn't even conscious of the fact that he was doing it. And she said, well, actually you did. And he looked at her and he said, oh my God, that's horrible, horrible. And he said, I am so sorry. He said, if I do that again, would you please let me know? Because That's not something I would want to do. And so they wound up, she actually wound up dating him for a while. I know they actually wound up dating and she really liked him and, you know, but she was just finding reasons not to go on dates with people because she didn't know how to set a boundary, how to talk to a man about something that was uncomfortable for her. And so she just kept going from guy to guy, one guy to the next, hoping that she was going to meet someone. And the reason I bring this up is that we do this in subtle ways. We're finding reasons to just walk away. And when I asked her, I said to her, well, if why wouldn't you have a conversation with him about it? And she said, well, I don't want to come across as being difficult, or needy, because I'm uncomfortable with this and we've only had one date. And I was like, well, how are you going to ever get to a second date or a fifth date or a 10th date if you don't learn how to have these kinds of conversations? I mean, even if it's on the first or second date and you really like someone, but there's one thing or a couple of things that, are issues for you, if you don't speak up and you don't start putting up boundaries and talking about what's coming up for you and getting clarification, you're going to keep walking away from one guy after the next. And this is where we really fall into the trap of being seduced by love bombers and players, because they ooze charm and they seem so into us and they're so confident, and they blow these other guys out of the water. And so we fall for the seduction of these really, these guys that come on so strong, but these really nice guys who may make an innocent mistake here and there, who don't just blow us out of the water quickly. It doesn't, we wind up falling for those guys because these other guys, they don't sweep us away with all their seductive tricks and their love bombing. So be careful, because you're probably passing on some really great guys and you don't even know it. So Amber is asking, I know none of us are perfect, but at what point do you acknowledge the red flags? After being burnt and hurt before, it is scary and no one wants to date a project, right? Well, Amber, I think it's, to me, it's pretty simple. If I'm having to ask for something over and over again, and I'm making a simple request of somebody and they're not respecting my boundaries, or they're not willing to honor some of my requests, or they tell me, God, you're so demanding, or you're hard to please, or whatever, those would be signs. Because a man, if you make a reasonable request, most grown adult men who really like you and want to get to know you, they're going to honor those requests and follow through, especially at the very beginning. So, they're going to want to make you happy. They're going to want to show you that show interest and that they want to please you, because they want to get to know you and they want to get in your good graces. But I think what happens is a lot of women want to teach men, or they want to school them, or they want to have these conversations over and over and over again. And it just doesn't work, And I can understand, like, if I went to a guy and I said, look, I really love texts and would love it if we could text more. And then he said, look, I'm working during the day. I'm happy to check in with you at night or whatever. Or he said, look, I just am not a big texter. I would, and that's an honest answer. I'm not going to sit there and disrespect his boundary. Now, if I'm making a request, I could say to him, are you okay with me reaching out to you from time to time? If I'm wanting connection, would you be okay if I send you a message and just say, hey, I'm thinking about you, just wanted to say hi? Now, we also have to respect a man's boundaries and respect his right to say, I'm not comfortable with that, or that isn't in my wheelhouse, or whatever. So there's got to be dialogue about these things and mutual respect. But if a man is making promises and saying, yes, I can do that, and not following through, then you have your answer. Then, it's better for him to say no, or I'm not comfortable doing that, than to make a promise and then not deliver on it. So what would have happened is, if you ignore red flags and you keep hitting up against the same wall over and over again, and you keep staying in a relationship and beating your head against that wall and allowing yourself to keep feeling badly or unheard or unseen, that's on you. And I actually learned how to draw very clear lines. If I give my word for something, I do it. If I say I'm going to do something, then I follow through on it. And I think any grown adult can do that. My husband doesn't have to ask me something more than once. Yeah, you can. I would love to hear a scenario. That would be terrific. If you'd want to do that, I'd be happy to hear a scenario. But something else is, as you get into a relationship and you get to know somebody, and as things progress, boundaries can change. My husband had a huge boundary around space. He had never been with a woman who could honor his need for space. And when he came into our relationship, he actually wrote a whole paragraph in his online dating profile saying that he didn't want to live with a partner. He essentially said he didn't want to get remarried. And when he met me, he saw how much I respected his space and his need for space, and how sensitive I am to when he's burned out, when he needs space. And he'd never been with somebody who could be so in tune with his needs and could really read his moods so well and be non-reactive. I don't take anything, we all take some things personally, but I don't take very much personally, especially when it comes to Benjamin. I know he loves me, and if he needs space, or if I'm getting in his space, I don't, I give him room, and I can pretty much look at him and read him in an instant, and then, no, this is not the time to talk to him. He needs space. If he's in the kitchen and he's eating, and I can see that he's just, worn out from the day, I will turn around and walk the other out the room and give him, the kitchen to himself, so that he can just have some time alone. We all need some mental and emotional space. Everybody does, even when you're with somebody who you adore. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. But his boundary around his need for space really changed. He was the one who asked me to marry him. So, and asked me to go look for a house for us when we were dating, because, there wasn't room at his place or at my place. And so we wound up getting a house together 1 year after we met. And then we got married on the second anniversary of our first date. We got married. So, yeah, but boundaries are important. And most of us have stayed in relationships, the wrong relationships, for way too long. And we've put up with so much, and we beat our heads against the wall, going over the same things time and time and time again. And I know I spent 13 years with my ex-husband talking about things ad nauseum, until finally, the day I decided the relationship was over, we were having the same argument about money and finances that we'd been having for 13 years. And a little voice in my head said to me, Lisa, if you had a tape recorder and you were able to, a tape recording from 13 years earlier, and you could press play, you would be having the same argument about money that you have been having for 13 years. And I stopped mid-sentence and I couldn't listen to his lies anymore. And I just said, look, I'm done. I can't do this with you anymore. I just can't. I said, we've been arguing about the same thing for 13 years and I'm done. I'm done. And I think, I packed my bags. We were living in Milan, Italy at the time. I booked a ticket home and I never looked back. That was the end of our 13-year relationship. So Tam, and what I realized was that I couldn't keep doing this, like that you can't stay in a relationship and just keep trying to resolve the same thing over and over and over again. That is really the definition of insanity. So Tammy writes, I've always struggled with having boundaries, but it's something I've been working on for a few years. My last relationship was going beautifully. Then he went dark out of nowhere. It's been nearly a month since I've heard from him. I feel like the ball is in his court and I don't want to come across as needy. At what point would it be appropriate to reach out, or is it best I let it go completely? So Tammy, my suggestion is this. If I were you, I would read a book called Attached. And this book is by an author called Amir Levine. People who do what your boyfriend is doing they usually have what's called an avoidant attachment style. No healthy, emotionally available person would abandon somebody in the middle of a relationship. So if somebody was having a change of heart, they would say something or they would talk to you about it. But just to disappear and cut you off like that, it's cruel. It's abandonment. And it's because he has serious intimacy issues. But it's not okay to do that. And the tendency would be that things will cool off and he probably will come back around and you'll forgive him, but then it'll happen all over again. And it's a cycle that'll keep repeating, and it's going to tear at the fabric of your trust, your connection, your ability to feel safe with this man. You're always going to be looking over your shoulder and waiting for the other shoe to drop again, and it will. And these become very emotionally draining and abusive relationships, and they can go on for a very long time. So I would get that book and read it, but I would reach out to him. I mean, you have to get clear first on what's really going on here. This is a very common pattern. And then when you're ready, you may just want to reach out to him. And I advise my clients to end these relationships because they don't work out. They don't. So Amber says, I replied and told him why I hang up. And his response was out of emotion, of course, that he kept going on about how I should call him or he's not going to call me back ever. I basically went to bed because it was late. Now, don't get me wrong. He's an amazing man, but I am a lot more dependent than the type he's used to. His ex-wife was a stay-at-home mom, solely dependent on him. He started therapy, but only two sessions in, to try and learn his triggers as well. Well, honey, this sounds like something you both may need to work on. You both may need to go together to therapy to learn how to handle these situations. If you really, really like him and you think that there's real potential for this relationship, working with a great coach or a great therapist could help you gain some skills to be able to work through these kinds of issues together. So I would go see a couples therapist. I really would. And you may want to find a Gottman therapist who uses Gottman's work, because I think it's very practical and useful for couples. I've had tremendous success with him, with Gottman's work. I've studied with John Gottman. So I would look at, Gottman therapists, and I would try to see if you can find somebody who uses his methodology to try to help you learn some skills for how to resolve these arguments. And I would also get, I think it's called the 7 Principles, PRINCIP of Principles That Make a Marriage Work. That's what I would do, is check out that book as well. Make a Marriage Work. I would look at that as well, because that's the Gottman's book, and it has some of their ideas in it. And maybe the two of you could work together on how to implement some of those strategies so that you can break this cycle. There is a link. It's just called the Gottman Institute. And it's really wonderful. I think they do some really good work. So check that out. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you all for being here. I do 2 podcasts a week. I'm going to take that back. I do a podcast weekly. We release 2 episodes. My podcast is called Dating Without Drama. You can find it wherever you find your podcasts. You can also go to lisashield.com/podcast, and you will find all of my episodes there. You can also go and check out my brand new website, lisashield.com. If you do listen to my podcast, please rate and like it. It really helps us out a lot. You can also tell your friends, your boyfriends, your sisters, your mother, your nieces and nephews, and your father, your uncles about the podcast. The second episode I do this one, Lunch with Lisa. The second episode we release is called Getting Inside the Right Male Mind. That's with my husband, Benjamin, who I think is the bomb. We've been together for 20 years, and I have never met a better man in my life. So you can listen to me get inside his mind and get him to share his perspective on love and what it means to be a man and what men are looking for. He talks about these subjects in a way that I've never heard any man express himself. So please tune into that. And also go to YouTube and like my YouTube channel. And finally, you can send us your suggestions if you have questions or topics you'd like me to discuss, either on this broadcast or on Getting Inside the Right Male Mind. You can send those to lisashield.com. Podcast@lisashield.com. Boy, this is not my day. And then finally, go check out my website. It is brand new. We have been working on it for over a year. I'm incredibly proud of it. And please click the link to watch my free 45-minute presentation. If you have any interest in just getting our help to find the guardian of your soul now, and you're ready to stop wasting time trying to figure this out on your own, then please stay to the end of that presentation. There is a link where you can book a breakthrough call with me or a member of my team. We will jump on the phone and discuss with you how we can help you get this solved in just 12 weeks. In 12 weeks, imagine being able to meet my soulmate off your to-do list. I'm Lisa Shield. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.